Some people carry wounds so quietly, you wouldn't notice unless they stopped speaking. Elias hadn't spoken to his mother in almost a decade, not because he hated her, but because every word she said left behind a scar. On the outside, Ruth was a refined, respected woman. At church, she was grace in heels. In the neighborhood, she was the woman who sent casseroles when someone died. But inside the house, with the doors closed and no audience watching, she was a puppeteer with a mother's voice. From a young age, Elias was told how to walk, how to sit, how to speak. He was given clothes 2 sizes too large to hide the softness in his body. He was told that dancing was effeminate, that boys don't cry, and that his laugh was too high-pitched for a proper son. What passed for parenting in that house was more like a mungy, slow erasure. It got worse when he was 16. That was the year she caught him smiling at his phone. One glance, one name, just enough to trigger a week-long war in the house. Elias had been texting a boy named Jeremy. There had been nothing obscene, nothing graphic, just questions, curiosity, a moment of breath between 2 closeted teens trying to understand who they were. But Ruth saw it differently. To her, it was disease. It was failure. It was her reputation, threatened. She didn't scream. She didn't hit. Ruth did something worse. She made it clinical. Without warning, she pulled Elias out of school for an entire week. She took him to a mental health clinic on the far side of the city where no one would recognize them. For observation, she said, just in case this is hormonal confusion. The therapist she chose wasn't just anyone. His name was Dr. Sam Whitmore, a calm man with tired eyes and a voice so still it felt like sitting beside a lake at dusk. For Elias, who had never been heard without being judged, those sessions became the only place he felt real. But reality doesn't last long in a house like Ruth's. The moment she sensed that Elias trusted Dr. Whitmore more than he trusted her, she ended the sessions. She didn't yell or explain. She simply never scheduled another appointment. When Elias asked why, she said, "We'll be praying instead." That always works when people really want to change. Elias didn't change. He broke. At 18, he packed a single suitcase, left a note that said, "I'd rather be nobody than be your idea of me," and disappeared from Ruth's world without looking back. He didn't attend holidays. He didn't respond to her cards. And when his sister Olivia texted every few months to say, "Mom is different now," he deleted the message before finishing it. But healing is never linear. One gray afternoon, as rain blurred the corners of his apartment window, Elias received a message from Olivia that didn't disappear. "I know you hate this, but she's seeing someone now, someone good. I think, I didn't know who else to tell. Just come to dinner." Once, Elias stared at the screen for a long time. He didn't reply. But 3 days later, he found himself boarding a bus back to the city that taught him how to vanish. And Ruth, his mother, was waiting. If this story already hits something buried deep, you're not alone. For more stories like this, full of pain, reckoning, and healing, stay close to Heart Stories. Because some truths need to be spoken, not just remembered. The house hadn't changed. The bricks still wore that tired shade of beige. The front door still creaked just enough to feel like a warning. And the air still held the scent of old perfume and lemon-scented wood polish. Like time had folded over itself and Elias was a teenager again, walking into a place that called itself home, but felt more like a museum curated by someone who feared dust and feelings in equal measure. Olivia opened the door. She smiled, but it was the kind of smile that carried guilt underneath. Her hug was quick, nervous. She didn't ask how he was, and he didn't offer. That had always been their way. Surviving meant skipping small talk. Ruth appeared in the hallway a few seconds later. She wore a pale blouse, her hair pinned in the same old twist. She looked thinner, maybe softer around the eyes, but the tilt of her chin was still sharp, still guarded. "Look at you," she said, voice bright like a lamp with flickering bulbs. "You've grown into that face. I knew you would." Elias didn't respond. Dinner was already set. The table was dressed like a magazine photo linen napkins, mismatched candles, and Ruth's best china, the kind only used when guests mattered. Olivia took her seat first, gesturing toward the chair next to her. "He's still in the kitchen," she whispered. "Who is?" But he didn't need the answer. Not after the footsteps approached. Not after the man stepped out carrying a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. Not after Elias recognized the face that used to wait silently behind a clipboard while he tried to find words for feelings too large to say aloud. Sam Whitmore. The room folded in on itself. Sam froze for a second, just long enough to read the storm in Elias's eyes. Then, without missing another beat, he placed the bottle gently on the table and said, "It's good to see you again." Elias. Elias stood still. Every inch of his body wanted to move, scream, run, collapse, but he didn't. He sat down slowly, hands clenched in his lap beneath the tablecloth. Ruth smiled wider than necessary. "You two know each other." Sam hesitated. "We met a long time ago." Ruth waved it off. "Portland's a small world." No one laughed. Dinner began like a play no one had rehearsed. Ruth asked questions without waiting for answers. Olivia tried to redirect the conversation whenever the silence stretched too long. Sam barely spoke. Elias didn't eat. The roast was dry. The wine was too sweet. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the 1,000 unspoken things pressing on the edge of Elias's throat. The memories of a couch in a quiet office. The sound of Sam's voice guiding him through grief. The look of disappointment on his mother's face when she found his journal and accused him of being dramatic. The burning shame when she said therapy was for people too weak to pray. And now, Sam, his once safe harbor, was seated at the same table as Ruth, passing her butter like it meant nothing. Like he hadn't once told Elias he was worthy of peace. Like he hadn't seen the bruises no one else noticed. Elias pushed back his chair. "I need air," he said, voice hoarse. He walked out the back door into the night. The garden was dead, winter-bitten and quiet. The same fence he once stared at as a teenager, wondering what was on the other side, stood like a relic. Behind him, the door creaked open again. It was Olivia. "I didn't know," she said softly. "I didn't recognize him until tonight. Mom said she met him again at some lecture. I thought it was a coincidence." Elias turned toward her, his face unreadable. "Do you believe her?" Olivia looked away. "I used to." She handed him a folded piece of paper. "He left this for you. He slipped it under your door before dinner." Elias took it with shaking fingers. Inside was a line of handwriting he hadn't seen in years. "I never stopped hoping you'd walk through my door again. I'm sorry it had to be hers." His knees weakened. The world tilted. But he didn't cry. Not yet. He stood in the cold until his body stilled, then returned inside, letter in pocket, answers buried, rage quiet. Tomorrow he would decide what to do. But tonight he would sleep in a house that once unmade him, beside people who didn't know they were standing on the bones of his former self. And no one, not even Sam, would be allowed to rewrite what it took Elias years to survive. The next morning came slowly, wrapped in the kind of silence that pressed against the ribs. Elias hadn't slept. He had laid there in the old guest room, the one with the peeling wallpaper and the ticking clock on the nightstand, staring at the ceiling, hearing echoes from another version of himself. It was strange how places remembered, how the floorboards creaked in the exact same pattern, how the hallway smelled like lemon disinfectant and regret, how the door to his childhood room remained closed, like a wound scabbed over but never cleaned. The note Sam left him burned in his jacket pocket. Elias didn't open it again. He didn't need to. The single line he had already read kept unraveling more questions than it answered. Why now? Why her? Why would the only person who ever saw him for who he was choose to sit at the same table with the person who tried to unmake him? He left the house before anyone else woke. The walk to the old clinic was long. It had moved buildings, but the name was the same. The sign above the door still carried the same serif font, faded at the edges, like a whisper from the past. The receptionist didn't recognize him, just pointed him to the room at the end of the hall. Sam was already waiting. He looked older in the daylight, softer. His hair had grayed more than Elias remembered, and his hands trembled faintly when he poured the tea. Neither of them touched it. "I owe you more than a note," Sam began, voice quiet, "and more than an apology." Elias didn't answer. His fingers curled around the arms of the chair, knuckles pale. Sam reached into the drawer and pulled out a worn envelope addressed to Elias, postmarked but never sent. "I wrote this after your last session," he said. "When your mother canceled everything and never gave you a reason, I kept it because I thought one day you might want the truth, even if it came late." Elias took the envelope but didn't open it right away. He stared at his own name, written in familiar cursive, and something in his chest ached with the weight of being remembered. "I shouldn't have let her silence you," Sam continued. "Back then, I was too afraid of crossing lines, too cautious about professional boundaries. But she manipulated both of us. Elias, you weren't the only one she tried to control." That word manipulated settled heavily between them. "She was your fiancé," Elias said flatly. "You knew who she was, and still you're with her now." Sam's eyes closed for a beat, like bracing for a tide. "She found me last year, said she'd changed, that she wanted to understand. I didn't know what to believe. I thought if I kept close, I could protect you if she ever... I thought I could undo something." Elias shook his head slowly. "You can't undo what never should have been done." The words hung there, trembling. He finally opened the letter. Inside, the handwriting was messier, more human. "Elias, I wanted to tell you what your mother never would, that who you are isn't a diagnosis, that your silence was never a flaw, but a shield, that I saw your courage when you thought you were breaking, and I wish I had done more to hold the space you needed. If I failed you, it wasn't because you weren't worth fighting for. It was because I wasn't brave enough. I hope one day you will be. You already are. More than you know." Elias folded the letter gently. "I'm not that boy anymore," he said. "I know," Sam replied, "but he still matters." They sat in stillness. Outside, winter sun broke through the clouds. Inside, it was too late for apologies, but maybe not too late for clarity. Elias stood. "I don't hate you, Sam, but I don't trust you. Not when you walk so easily back into the fire that almost destroyed me. I don't expect you to." Sam said. Elias nodded, one hand on the doorknob, then paused. "If you're still trying to protect me, do it from a distance." He left without looking back. For the first time in years, he didn't feel like he was running. He was choosing, and that, somehow, felt more powerful than forgiveness. When Elias returned to the house, the sun had already begun to set. Its light spilled through the windows in fractured beams, casting long shadows across the floor, as if the house itself knew something was coming. Ruth was in the living room, arranging flowers in a crystal vase. Lilies. Always lilies, her favorite for their elegance and silence. Olivia sat on the couch, scrolling through her phone, pretending not to be watching the door. But the moment Elias stepped inside, everything paused. "You've been out long," Ruth said lightly. "I hope you didn't get lost." Elias didn't answer. He walked past her into the kitchen, pulled a glass of water, and stood silently with his back to her. The weight of the morning still pressed against his chest, but something colder had settled behind it, a sharp, quiet clarity. Ruth followed. "I know this is all sudden," she said, "but I'm trying. Elias, you should know that." He turned. "No," he said evenly. "You're not trying. You're managing. There's a difference." Her brow twitched. "Excuse me, you have never wanted to change. You just want control. You want the version of me you can show off. You want to be the kind of mother who gets praised for welcoming her gay son back home, but only after he folds himself small enough to fit into your comfort." Ruth's expression flattened. The smile vanished. "You have no idea what I sacrificed for you." "That's the problem," Elias said, stepping forward. "You act like I owe you for surviving your love." Olivia stood quietly in the hallway, frozen between rooms. I took you to therapy. Ruth snapped. I tried to fix whatever you took me to Sam so he could fix me. Elias cut in. You didn't want a son. You wanted a project. There was a long silence. A pause that ached. Then Ruth laughed. But it was the brittle kind, sharp and dry. I should have known this is what I'd get, she said. A boy who runs away and comes back with accusations, who thinks his pain is more important than his family's shame, who still plays the victim. Elias breathed in slowly. I'm not playing anything. Mother, I am the result of you refusing to see what was in front of you. And the worst part is, you think loving someone means owning them. Olivia stepped into the room. Stop, she said, voice quiet but firm. Just stop. Ruth turned. This doesn't concern. Yes, it does, Olivia said, because I've spent my whole life trying to earn your approval. I wore the clothes you picked, dated the men you liked, majored in what you said was respectable, and I thought if I just kept doing everything right, maybe you'd treat me like I mattered. Ruth blinked. You've always mattered. No, Olivia interrupted. You've always needed someone to orbit around you. When Elias left, I became the next planet, and I stayed because I thought it was loyalty, but it was fear. She turned to Elias, her voice trembling now. I knew she was seeing someone. I didn't know it was Sam until last night. I didn't recognize him, not until dinner. But I did something worse. Elias tilted his head. What I reached out to him, Olivia whispered. Months ago, I found him online. I told him Mom had changed, that maybe, if he reconnected with her, she'd become softer. I thought if she loved someone again, maybe she'd stop needing so much from me. Elias froze. Olivia's eyes welled up. I didn't know about their past. I didn't know she once broke him, too. I wanted peace. I didn't think it would cost yours. He didn't speak. Not for a long time. Then, finally, he looked at his sister, not with anger, but with the grief of someone who saw clearly for the first time how deep the damage ran. We were both trying to survive her, he said. Ruth folded her arms, wounded pride flashing across her face. You think you're so righteous, but you're still my children. Elias exhaled. No, we were. He turned to Olivia. You can stay, he said, but you don't have to. You're allowed to leave. You don't owe her your quiet. Ruth's face twisted. If you walk out now, don't bother coming back. Elias looked at her with a steadiness she'd never expected. I walked out 10 years ago. This, he gestured to the room, to the house. To her was never mine to come back to. He walked past Olivia, gently brushing her shoulder. If you ever want to find me, he said, I'll be where she can't reach. And with that, he stepped into the evening light, carrying nothing but the truth and the letter still folded in his pocket. The road out of that house was quieter than the one he arrived on. No one called after him, no slamming doors, no tears, just the steady sound of his own footsteps, and the realization that silence could feel like a beginning instead of an ending. Elias didn't go home right away. He walked until the streetlights blinked on, then caught a train out of town and stayed in a motel by the edge of a pine forest, one of those places with thin walls and scratchy blankets. But it didn't matter. That night, he slept without dreams. The kind of sleep that comes only after setting something heavy down for the last time. When he woke the next morning, there was a small envelope under the door. Inside was a handwritten note. From Olivia, I found something in her drawer after you left. I think you need to see it. Folded within was another letter written in Ruth's handwriting, but not addressed to Elias. At the top, in stiff cursive, it read, Olivia, thank you for bringing him back into orbit. The rest of the letter was sharper, colder. Ruth had never sent it, but the words were venom, carefully measured. Sam is weak. Elias always trusted the wrong people. If I can make Sam love me again, maybe Elias will finally stop hating me. Maybe he'll come back. They're both emotional creatures. Manipulating them isn't difficult. I just have to act sorry long enough. Elias didn't feel rage. Not anymore. He just sat there, hands steady, eyes clear, as he finally accepted the truth his mother hadn't changed. She had only evolved in cruelty. Her tools were no longer shouts and slaps, but silence, guilt, strategy. He folded the letter neatly and threw it into the motel trash bin. Later that week, Sam called once. Elias didn't answer. The voicemail was quiet. "I'm sorry. I didn't know. If you never want to hear from me again, I understand, but if you ever do, I'm still here." Elias listened, then deleted the message. He didn't need to hold on to anyone just because they had once helped him stand. A month passed, then another, and on the first bright weekend of spring, Elias returned to a place he hadn't visited in years, a clearing in the woods 2 hours north, where pine needles blanketed the ground and wind moved like breath through the trees. It was where Sam had once taken him during a therapy retreat, a place where they had talked about fear, about being seen, about the possibility of building a life outside expectation. This time, Elias came alone. He brought tools. He cleared the weeds. He restored the old cabin that still stood, barely, like a secret. It took days, then weeks, then finally, it looked livable, quiet, simple. Enough. He moved in, not to escape, but to begin. Sometimes Olivia called, sometimes she didn't. She was still trying to figure out where she stood, and Elias let her. Some things heal slower, on their own timeline. He never heard from Ruth again, and that, too, was a kind of peace in his new life. Elias wrote letters he never sent, painted walls in soft colors, adopted a dog from the nearby shelter, a quiet, aging hound named Marlowe. He hung Sam's letter on the back of the door, not to remember him, but to remember himself. And on the first night, the fire crackled warm in the hearth. Elias stepped outside, looked at the sky, and whispered, "I survived all of it, not for applause, not for forgiveness, but because no one gets to keep rewriting your story except you." What would you do if the person who once saved you stood beside the person who once broke you? Would you walk away or try to pull them apart? If this story resonated, even a little, share it with someone who might need to hear it. Subscribe to Heart Stories because healing isn't always loud, but it always matters.